it's the middle of the week, and there are more political rumors than in your average season of Beverly Hills 90210. So let's comb through them, shall we? The ex-Prime Minister of Israel claims that Putin promised him not to kill Zelensky. And that's what made Zelensky stay in Ukraine. Ukraine has weapons of its own production that can destroy targets on the territory of Russia. Meanwhile, in Russia, a man was trying to rob Lenin's grave, and India figured out a clever way to profit off of the war in Ukraine. With that, hi, my name is Yulia, and you're watching The Brief, where we talk about everything that happened in and pertaining to Ukraine in the week thus far in about 20 minutes. Let's go. The ex-Prime Minister of Israel made a very peculiar statement this week. He said that during the first days of the invasion of Ukraine, he flew to Moscow on request of Zelensky to talk to Putin, where Putin promised him not to kill Zelensky. He claims that Putin personally promised him that and confirmed it several times. After that, the Prime Minister of Israel at the time allegedly called Zelensky, who was hiding in a secret bunker. Did the Prime Minister of Israel confuse something here? And passed along a message from the head of the Kremlin. The allegations follow to say that after that, Zelensky came out of the bunker, went to his office, and took that famous video on Bankova Street to show Putin that he's not afraid. Now, that's a lovely story, except there are a couple of things that don't add up. The ex-Prime Minister of Israel said that these events transpired in March, but the first video of Volodymyr Zelensky on Bankova Street showing that he did not leave Ukraine and he is here and he's with his people was on February 25th. And here's that video.
הכי יקר זה חיי מנהיג, וידעתי שזלנסקי תחת איום, הוא היה בבונקר שלא ידעו את מקומו, אז באיזשהו שלב, 3 שעות פנימה 4, אנחנו כבר מדלגים לתוך הפגישה, אני אומר לו, שמע, מה עם הסיפור הזה? אתה מתכוון להרוג? והוא אמר, אני לא ארוג את זלנסקי. ואז אמרתי לו, אני צריך להבין שאתה נותן לי את המילה שאתה לא הורג את זלנסקי. הוא אמר, אני לא הורג את זלנסקי. אחרי הפגישה, עוד באוטו, מהקרמלין לשדה התעופה, אני מתקשר לזלנסקי או בוואטסאפ או טלגרם.
לא פחד שהם יראו את זה?
לא, אין לי בעיה, כי הייתי, לא, ההנחה היא שהכל מואזן, תקשיב, ההנחה שלי, קשר לזלנסקי ישירות, ואני אומר לו, תשמע, יצאתי מפגישה, הוא לא הולך להרוג אותך. הוא אומר לי, אתה בטוח? אמרתי, 100%, הוא לא הורג אותך. אחרי שעתיים זלנסקי עלה למשרד שלו, עשה סרט סלפי כזה מתוך הלשכה, אני לא מפחד והכל.
Всім добрий вечір. Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут. Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде й далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні!
It looks like Russian propaganda will do anything to discredit the Ukrainian leader, but as always, they forget tiny little, not so tiny, details that really show that their fairy tales are worth nothing. In response to these statements by the ex-Israeli Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, had this to say on Twitter. In the past, Putin has made promises not to occupy Crimea, not to violate Minsk agreements, not to invade Ukraine. Yet, he has done all of these things. Do not be fooled. He's an expert liar. Every time he has promised not to do something, it has been exactly part of his plan. I mean, not only is there no evidence to substantiate these claims, even to the naked eye, they don't add up. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, there had been over 10 attempts to take Zelensky's life conducted by the Russian Federation. So, something's a little bit fishy here, don't you think? Just a gentle reminder to help the algorithm and me to fight this info war by giving this video a like, leaving a comment, subscribing to my channel, and turning on all of your notifications. Thank you. And while Russia is stuck making lies about the past, Ukraine is looking towards the future. The Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhailo Fedorov, had said that 5 countries reached out being interested in developing their own app similar to Dia. They plan to use the original Ukrainian Dia to create their own digital products for their citizens. As I've mentioned in previous briefs, Dia is an application that lets you do all things government-related and paperwork-related in one application. You can store your driver's license, your passport, your kid's birth certificate, your mortgage plan, pay your bills, basically everything in one app on your smartphone. And I, for one, am very excited to have that opportunity in the US, as it's one of the countries interested. In contrast to the positive news, the anniversary of 1 year of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine is coming up on February 24th. And to that, Volodymyr Zelenskyy has something to say. He believes that Russians want to do something symbolic on the date to compensate for the year worth of defeats. We see increased pressure on various front lines and in the information field. It is very difficult in the Donetsk region. There are fierce battles. But we must persevere. We must use every day to strengthen the defense at the front and strengthen our positions. We have no other choice but to defend ourselves and win. And while I can't speak for the battlefield from my own experience, I can speak from the informational front. And I do confirm that there has been a lot more Russian trolls, a lot more disinformation, a lot more insults flying around. One of the things that Russians want to do is demotivate Ukrainians from going online and speaking the truth and delivering the news. And so I've been blessed with so many lovely messages that attack my character, attack my life, attack my mental health, attack my appearance out of all things. But it's important to remember that all of this is just part of an enemy campaign. Or if you don't like me, I don't care either way. You're stuck with me forever. I'm kidding, but if you don't like me, it's your right and you can move on to somebody else or block my account, but I will continue being here and I will continue delivering the news. And the armed forces of Ukraine will still be there, countering this immoral invasion from the Russian Federation, despite all of the things they tried to do to scare us. Like this one. In the north of Crimea, the Russians have built a new military base, said Brady Afric, an analyst of the Department of Foreign and Defense Policy Research at the American Enterprise Institute. Construction began at the end of October and lasted until January 2022. The base has a helipad and a fortified perimeter. Doing things like this, Russians are hoping to increase their military potential and make it seem like they have more force than they really do, and they're more prepared for the offensive than they really are. And we're gonna talk about it in the Russia section in a little bit. But for now, let's focus on Ukraine. The support forces of the armed forces of Ukraine have neutralized and destroyed 42,000 explosive objects on the territory of the country. Currently, more than 1,300 hectares of land, 151 kilometers of power lines, 40 kilometers of gas pipelines, 184 kilometers of roads, 310,000 square meters of buildings in the liberated regions of Ukraine, and more than 42,000 explosive objects have been neutralized and destroyed. 14 demining groups of the Support Forces Command and the calculation of the remote-controlled demining machine Bozena 5 are involved in the implementation of demining measures in the liberated regions of Ukraine. And we will sweep all of our territory clean. But meanwhile, in the regions of Ukraine that were not deoccupied yet, some terrible, terrible things are happening. Pregnant women have no access to necessary medical care. Why? Because Russians occupied all civilian medical facilities. The mortality rate of the mothers and newborns in the temporarily occupied territories has more than tripled compared to similar indicators before the beginning of the Russian military aggression. And that's reported by Hanna Malyar. And this is another indicator to the people who say, just give up. Why are you continuing this war? Just let Russia take over. Let Russia take over and do what? Let mothers die? Let newborns die? Continue torturing civilians? Russia taking over is not going to stop deaths. Pacifism kills in this particular scenario because Russia is not interested in liberating territories. Russia is interested in torturing Ukrainian civilians and making their lives thousands of times worse than they were before. And in the spirit of liberating these territories faster, Ukraine is working on receiving the first squadron of Western aircraft. It doesn't matter if it's an American F-16, a Swedish Gripen, a French Mirage or Rafale, or a Eurofighter. It is important to open a position, remove the taboo, and get the first squadron of aircraft. I agree with Dmytro Kuleba One of the things that is the most important right now is to acquire air superiority, and we will do everything possible to make that happen. And even though Ukraine promised Olaf Scholz that we will not be using Western-made weapons to strike the territory of Russia, Alexei Danilov had a very interesting statement to say. As for the territory of Russia, no one forbids us to destroy targets with Ukrainian-made weapons. Do we have such weapons? Yes, we do. Ukraine has been producing its own weapons of destruction and doing a fantastic job at it. So far, we have produced a drone, we have produced a self-propelled howitzer, lots and lots of things that will help us defeat the enemy. And while the West is doing everything possible to not escalate by not allowing Ukraine to use Western weapons to strike artillery hubs in Russia, we come up with our own. And the last in this section, Ukraine has sent its rescue workers to Turkey to help aid with a recent earthquake that has taken so many lives and brought so much destruction to the country. They will start arriving to help remove the consequences today and tomorrow. And speaking of foreign help, let's move on to Russia, who also sent crews to help Turkey eliminate the consequences of the earthquake. You would think troops of rescuers, right? They sent PMC Wagner and Kadyrovites, mercenaries. They sent mercenaries. And rumor has it, they did not send them there to actually help, but to eliminate the Chechen commanders who have received asylum in Turkey a long time ago. What a helpful partner Russia is. And speaking of mercenary companies that have become ever so increasingly popular in Russia, like, Wagner, then Shoigu, the Minister of Defense of Russia, has own private military company. Well, now Gazprom, the largest oil enterprise in Russia, is creating its own private military company. Let that sink in. In the last shocking news, a deputy from Russian State Duma is calling to bring back the death penalty for those who are traitors of the Russian regime. Who are those traitors? The people who left Russia and went abroad and are now criticizing the regime from there. He says that many people share his position and that if it were up to him, the sentence would be even harsher. Harsher than death? So like full 90s style kidnapping and torture in the woods?
I have to go, but if I find one single dog hair when I get back, I'll rub sand in your dead little eyes.
Very good, sir.
I also need you to go buy sand.
Yes, sir.
He emphasized that Russia should be able to carry out these severe sentences on the territory on which the traitor is currently located. So if you're Russian and you move to England, Russian deputies believe that they should be able to kill you in England. I frequently have no comments to Russian madness. This is a complete Russian circus. I wholeheartedly don't know how they see this being carried out, according to international law. Actually, you know what? I would love to see Russian State Duma deputies coming to England to try and execute the traitors and then just going to prison. Because you just can't kill someone because you don't like their position towards the government. In other news, a true believer of the modern and ancient Russian regime, a Moscow resident tried to steal the body of Lenin. Yeah. A 42-year-old man was detained by Moscow police at night while attempting to take with him on a walk to his home, I don't know, the body of the dictator from the mausoleum. The guards drew attention to a suspicious man walking near the premises. Then he started to pull the door and tried to enter, but was detained, and during the interrogation, he admitted that his aim was to steal Lenin. Just a normal day in Russia, everybody. I wonder what he wanted to do with the body. Like, maybe reincarnate him? Do some satanic ritual? Oh no, wait. The Satanists are in Ukraine, though I forgot. No clue. And meanwhile, all of this is happening directly on the territory of Russia. The world is discussing the infamous potential Russian spring offensive. The Institute for the Study of War, however, believes that Russia is unable to conduct several offensive operations at the same time. If they were gonna try and take Donbass, they would not be trying to take Kyiv like some people were speculating. The Ukrainian military informs that the Russian troops have not formed a sufficiently powerful strike group to carry out an offensive in the direction of Zaporizhia. As the Institute for the Study of War continues to monitor the movement of Russian troops, they conclude that the enemy currently lacks the resources to attack in several directions other than just Zaporizhia. According to experts, Russia has not demonstrated the ability to conduct several large offensive operations which are necessary to simultaneously enter the administrative borders of the Donetsk region and seize Zaporizhia. So it is not likely that the spring is going to bring anything new to the Russian world. And while Putin might try to make you believe that the special military operation is gaining a positive momentum, the heavy battlefield losses say otherwise. Watch this video. Yeah, the world of Russian misinformation and reality often tend to be on a very different page. For instance, like, Russia tries to believe that sanctions aren't affecting it whatsoever. However, data from the Ministry of Finance of Russian Federation has some other indications. It looks like Russia lost 1.8 trillion rubles in January alone. And that's about a modest amount of $25 billion, 8 billion of which belong to the losses in oil and gas exports alone. And it looks like, to not lose the grip on distorting the truth, a propaganda misinformation campaign for peace with Russia is being prepared in Budapest under the auspices of Russian special services. The planned rally at the capital of Hungary was announced at the end of last week. I wonder how Budapest citizens are going to react, because Budapest mayor and the Hungarians that tend to live there are increasingly counter-Russian, but we shall see. The main organizer of the rally is the Hungarian Workers' Party, which adheres to Marxist, communist, and Eurocentric ideologies. They just don't give up, do they? Even when they're losing. And when they give up, they just don't give up. Well, enough about Russia, let's talk about what's going on in the world. Ben Hodges believes that after the liberation of Crimea, everything that Russia tried to build up to so far is going to completely fall apart. Donbass will be yours. I believe that Ukraine will be able to liberate Crimea by the end of August this year, if, and this is a big if, the West will provide for Ukraine's needs to make Crimea ineffective for the Russian military. After that, everything will collapse. Crimea is a key. And if you'd like to know exactly how Ukraine can regain Crimea and put Russians in the corner, watch my previous brief where I talk about it extensively. Right now, the main goal of the Ukrainian army, in terms of Crimea, is to prevent the restoration of the Kerch Bridge, by that keeping the Russian military supply chain inactive. And since we're talking about Russia who's a terrorist, it only seems like a good transition to this piece of news that's quite disturbing. ISIS fighters, taking advantage of the earthquake, fled the prison in Syria where they were held. If you didn't know, the earthquake did not only affect Turkey, but also affected parts of Syria. A total of 20 prisoners disappeared from that facility. And that is terrifying. And on that, the terrible news about the earthquake are not over. At least 2 UNESCO monuments were destroyed as a result: Fortress of Gaziantep and the Citadel of Aleppo. Gaziantep Fortress belongs to the period of the Hittite Empire. The building was completed during the Roman Empire in the 2 to 3 centuries AD. The Citadel of Aleppo, built in the 13th century, is considered one of the oldest and largest palaces in the world. In the 2010s, during the battles for Aleppo, the citadel suffered significant destruction, but in 2018, the restored landmark was open to visitors. Currently, the Syrian authorities are assessing the extent of the destruction. And here I was hoping that 2023 will be somehow better than 22, 21, and 20. But it's setting itself up to be one hell of an interesting year. In more positive news, Switzerland is close to lifting the ban on the supply of arms to Ukraine, which is something they have never done before because they're neutral.
Silence is violence, Kyle.
A bill was recently introduced that would allow Switzerland the re-export of arms to the countries that have the same democratic values as Switzerland. And according to a recent sociological survey, about 55% of Swiss citizens are in favor of the bill and in favor of supplying arms to Ukraine. So thank you for that. Japan has also taken another step away from their normal neutrality. In connection with the situation in Ukraine, as a contribution to international efforts to solve this problem, our country is taking measures to ban the import of crude oil and oil products produced in Russia above the limit price. For expensive oil products, $100 per barrel. For cheap oil products, $40 per barrel. The restrictions came into effect starting February 6th. Meanwhile, Georgia, the country, is considering resuming air traffic with Russia. But in that case, the European Union might introduce secondary sanctions against the country. It's very interesting because Georgia is a country that screams that Russia occupies 20% of its territory, yet has one of the largest influxes of Russians fleeing the mobilization, and does not seem to be too quick to impose sanctions on them. While the Georgian people overwhelmingly support Ukraine and absolutely stand against Russia, the Georgian government begs to differ. And speaking of partnerships with Russia, India takes the cake. Not even in a partnership with Russia, but in just being the trickiest country on planet Earth at the moment. India buys cheap Russian oil and processes it into the fuel for Europe and the US. No, I mean, I gotta give it to them. It's a smart business. But they're also one of the largest sources of income in Russia at the moment. So they're playing a double-sided game where they're making profit off the war in Ukraine on both sides. Why are they not sanctioned yet? New Delhi is increasingly taking a central place on the oil map of the world, as it helps the West achieve its twin goals. Firstly, in this way, against the background of sanctions, the Kremlin's energy income decreases. And secondly, it allows countries that refuse to buy oil from Russia prevent a shock and interruptions of oil supply. On a personal level, wow. How low, India. On a level from business perspective, wow, well done, look at you. Anyways, with that, that's all I have for you for today, so you know the drill. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, please don't forget to give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss when the next one comes out. And as always, check your sources and don't fall for propaganda. And I will see you soon.